Of all the modern WWE stars that may not be currently being used to their optimum potential, one could certainly make a case for Bobby Lashley. With his chiseled physique, awing agility, and punishing power-based offense all present in his early 40s, Lashley has long possessed the gifts needed to be a top guy in professional wrestling. More than a decade ago, WWE saw fit to position Lashley as one of their best protected studs. And yet, in the 1 year since returning to WWE, we've seen Lashley give bizarre sit-down interviews, engage with Sami Zayn in one of the dumbest rivalries ever, and slap his own ass as a means of demonstrating his athletic superiority. What gives? With Lio Rush present, can't the two just have the Brock Lesnar-Paul Heyman dynamic, where the little guy spits out endless hype and the big guy silently rips apart the opposition like the Terminator? Why must it be so complex? Bobby Lashley has long been an intriguing prospect in the world of wrestling, whether an OVW project in his late 20s or with an established pedigree in his early 40s. He's remained the same force of nature for over a decade and a half, and here's to WWE getting the most out of him sooner rather than later. I'm Sam from Cultaholic.com, and these are 10 things you didn't know about Bobby Lashley. Join us! Number 10. Dual sports star. Like Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar among scores of others, Lashley has an extensive background in amateur wrestling, giving himself a base that would serve him well not only in professional wrestling, but when he gave mixed martial arts a serious try about a decade ago. Really, somebody with Lashley's athletic credentials could probably play any sport he damn well pleases, like figure skating judges would dare give a man of his size a low score. But as a child, wrestling was not Lashley's first love. Lashley had to constantly move with his family as a child due to his father's commitments as an army drill sergeant. And it was when the Lashleys settled at Fort Riley in Kansas that Bobby, in the 7th grade, first took up wrestling. Initially, he pursued it as an off-season alternative to American football, though really the idea of figure skating was a goof, but one could certainly imagine Lashley chasing down some poor quarterback with a life-altering tackle. Number 9. Continued success. Lashley further pursued wrestling while attending high school in Junction City, Kansas, where he would take home a Kansas State championship in 1994. His wrestling pursuits would not stop there, as Lashley continued with his sport of choice upon attending Missouri Valley College shortly after. In 3 consecutive years from 96 to 98, Lashley won the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics Wrestling Championship while also winning 4 All-American honors. The fact that Lashley competed in the 177-pound category as an adult is somewhat mesmerizing. Think about CM Punk's UFC weight. After graduating Missouri Valley in 99 with a bachelor's degree in Human Service Agency Management and Recreation Administration, Lashley followed his father's footsteps into the Army, where he continued wrestling. In his 3 years serving, Lashley would win gold and silver medals competing in the International Military Sports Council Freestyle Wrestling Championships. Now that is dedication to a sport. Number 8. Near-death experience. After leaving the Army, Lashley settled down in Colorado Springs, where he set himself toward his next big goal, competing in the Summer Olympics. Lashley began training with the hopes of qualifying for the 2004 Games in Athens, with seemingly no roadblocks in his path, save for a few fellow competitors looking to fill the same open spots. But one day in 2003, the dream came to an end, and Lashley's life almost did with it. While making a routine stop at his local bank, Lashley was surprised by the sound of gunfire behind his head. Quite suddenly, he was in the midst of an armed robbery between the gunman and the money. Lashley claims that in the security footage, you can even see the plume of gunpowder behind his head right before he dove to the ground for his own safety. It was in taking that fall that Lashley injured his knee, splitting it wide open and requiring immediate surgery. In the blink of an eye, in unthinkable circumstances, Lashley was unable to pursue his Olympic goal. Number 7. Highest recommendation. In his amateur wrestling days, Lashley ended up on the radar of WWE, and how could he not? He and Brock Lesnar clearly had more in common than just the same initials between the physiques, the amateur credentials, and unparalleled athleticism. Before the Olympic dream met its end, Lashley spurned WWE's overtures a few times, keeping his focus solely on amateur wrestling and the goals he'd set for himself. But it wasn't just the office folks at WWE that tried to steer Lashley their way. One day, while he was at the Olympic Training Center working toward a spot in the 2004 Games, it just so happened that Kurt Angle showed up to film a WWE vignette of some sort. Angle was familiar with Lashley through his amateur achievements and recommended giving pro wrestling a try. By this time, Angle was a multi-time WWE champion and one of the most recognizable stars in the company, certainly bringing home big paydays all the while. Once the Olympic goal was out of the question, Lashley ended up following Angle's lead, another world-class legitimate athlete in WWE's system. Number 6. Squad goals. In late 2004, Lashley officially signed a developmental deal with WWE and reported to Ohio Valley Wrestling, and it wasn't long before he took to the ring. Beginning at the dawn of 2005, Lashley began working almost weekly at OVW cards, picking up quick wins over smaller foes while he was built up as a heel under the name Blaster Lashley. In this time, he was a member of the stable Boland Services, headed by veteran manager, now knockoff headphone salesman Kenny Starmaker Boland. Lashley's stablemates of the time included two other individuals who would soon be making their way to the WWE roster, Ken Doane and Mike Mondo, or future Spirit Squadders Kenny and Mikey. Could you imagine Lashley donning the all-green garb of the Spirit Squad, cheerfully squealing Bobby in a roll call? Yeah, me neither. Lashley would ultimately turn on his Boland Services ally shortly before coming aboard the main roster full-time, which he managed to do less than 1 year after signing his developmental deal. Number 5. Creamed corn. If you ever want to get an idea of just how strong Bobby Lashley really is, consider this tale from his time in OVW when he almost injured his boss for real. Jim Cornette, at the time the head man of OVW, was involved in a physical angle in which Lashley took the legendary manager and storyteller and body slammed him hard into the canvas. Problem is, Lashley's execution of the move nearly did Cornette in, compressing him wildly with an authoritative slam. Lashley thought he was going to catch a tongue lashing from a man famous for his volcanic tirades, and Cornette did go off, but not at Lashley, at the rest of the OVW roster. As Lashley tells the story in an appearance on Sam Roberts' podcast, Cornette determined that the reason why Lashley was so reckless in slamming him was because wrestlers he'd been working with had been sandbagging the novice wrestlers on slams and other moves, so that when Lashley hoisted Cornette, no cruiserweight himself, off the mat, he did so with excessive strength. Lashley claims he didn't even notice the other wrestlers not cooperating with him, which should tell you just how powerful he truly is. Number 4. Voice of Reassurance. In September 2005, Lashley arrived at the big time, earning a call-up to WWE SmackDown after less than 1 year of honing his craft. Prior to then, Lashley would work the odd house show match through 2005 with barely several months of experience under his belt. Wrestlers like William Regal, Val Venis, Spike Dudley, and others would be among the select group of veterans that worked with him at official WWE events before his call-up went into effect. Though Lashley is a confident athlete, he admits to being very nervous prior to his official start on SmackDown, partially because he wasn't expecting to wrestle on that night, as he figured he was just part of the traveling OVW crew that was on hand. He revealed in a podcast interview with Lillian Garcia that he began to panic a bit, but would be settled down by someone he considers a true mentor, Paul Heyman. The brash advocate reassured Lashley of his talent and abilities, telling him that when the match was through, he'd wonder why he ever beat himself up worrying about it. To this day, Lashley maintains a strong friendship with Heyman, never forgetting how much the pep talk meant to him that night. Number 3. VIVA Variety. Lashley secured a release from WWE in early 2008 for reasons that have never really been truly disclosed. He would eventually make his way to TNA in the spring of 2009, leaving about a 15-month interim period where he could pick and choose his own bookings. In 2008, Lashley would only wrestle in a handful of matches, but it would be a resume of bouts that read like a list of hidden gems. One such match occurred in June of 2008, traveling to AAA in Mexico to take part in a 6-man tag where one of his partners was former SmackDown grappler Kenzo Suzuki, with the opponents including the second incarnation of La Parka as well as Silver King. Another 6-man tag took place at a Fusion Pro Wrestling show in his native Colorado, where one of his partners was AJ Styles, in what was likely the first time the two crossed paths. Other matches would see Lashley face Rhino at WWC's 35th anniversary show in San Juan, a battle with Sylvester the Predator Turkey in Antonio Inoki's IGF promotion, and a triple threat match for Harley Race's WLW promotion in Missouri, where one of the opponents was Go Shiozaki. Now that is a unique portfolio of matches, all which took place in a 3-month stretch. Number 2. Looking for a fight. Like Brock Lesnar, Dave Bautista, Jack Swagger, and a handful of other wrestlers with some form of wrestling or martial arts background, Lashley decided to give MMA a serious go in 2008. He got somewhat of a late start in the sport, fighting for the first time at the age of 32, but would still go on to carve out a respectable run for himself particularly with the Bellator organization. Between December 2008 and October 2016, Lashley would fight a grand total of 17 times, earning 15 victories along the way. Among those 15 wins, 4 of them would come via knockout, while 8 more were by submission. You don't often see Lashley resort to complex submissions in WWE, but as a fighter, rear naked chokes, Americanas, and guillotine chokes were among his arsenal. Lashley even once drew a submission victory from a flurry of punches during an October 2014 fight that lasted just 91 seconds. It may not have necessarily been against UFC-level heavyweight competition, but 15 MMA wins is still 15 MMA wins. And number 1, making an impact. We can't let this list go by without giving a shout to Impact Wrestling, where Lashley would have 2 tenures, the second of which would see him shine as a nearly invincible brute. Though the audience may have been smaller, Lashley never looked stronger than when he was the arrogant yet deadly kingpin of the promotion, leading the Beatdown Clan and sitting atop Impact Wrestling as its champion for a sizable length of time. He may not be the first person you think of when TNA Wrestling comes to mind, but he sits second place all time for most days as TNA World Heavyweight Champion. At 403 days across 4 reigns, Lashley is miles behind the number 1 guy, Kurt Angle, with 608 days and 6 reigns, but is the only other wrestler to breach the 400-day mark. Lashley's longest reign was a 175-day run, close to 6 months over the first half of 2017, prior to dropping the belt to fellow amateur wrestling stalwart Alberto El Patron. And if you missed Lashley's second run in TNA, especially his time as world champion, it's well worth going back and seeing how a man of his considerable talents can be used to his fullest potential. And that's our list. I've been Sam from Cultaholic.com. You can follow me on Twitter here. You can follow all of us at Cultaholic. If you like what we do here at Cultaholic, you can check us out on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Cultaholic. And no matter what you do, don't ever forget to hit subscribe and join us.